The most terrifying moment is not the argument, the tears, or the fight everyone expected. It is the silence that arrives without warning on an ordinary afternoon, when the person who has absorbed everything simply stops. No announcement, no ultimatum, no dramatic exit. Just a silence so different you feel it immediately, even if you do not yet have a name for it. Let me give you one. This is the moment Carl Jung spent decades circling. Not a breakdown, but the moment the psyche stops compensating and starts integrating. Hear that carefully, because most of what you have been told about this moment is wrong. Your kindness is not dying. You are not becoming cold. You are not turning into what you once fought. An internal arrangement you have maintained at enormous cost is collapsing. And when it collapses, it does not leave behind a smaller person. It leaves someone the people who fed on the old version can no longer recognize, manipulate, or metabolize. You know that old arrangement. You were the one who understood everyone, kept the peace, translated moods, softened blows, absorbed impact so the room could keep functioning. You did it in family, friendships, relationships, and at work. For a long time, that felt like quiet power. But the room's need for you never became the room's protection of you. When you were in pain, no one absorbed you. When you were in need, no one translated your moods. The math caught up, and when it catches up in a person like you, the psyche does not throw a tantrum. It goes silent. Sit with that. The pattern of being drained, taken for granted, loved for what you provided rather than for what you were, was not fate. It was an unconscious arrangement beneath your conscious life. And this moment, when the old absorption stops, is not the failure of your kindness. It is the moment that arrangement becomes conscious. For the first time in your adult life, you are no longer its servant. You are becoming its director. Almost no one will explain this honestly, because honesty disrupts everyone who benefited from the old you. The world you were shaped by profited from your absorption, sometimes maliciously, often just structurally. Every family, group, and workplace needs someone to metabolize its emotional exhaust. Once it finds that person, it becomes dependent. You were load-bearing, so when you go silent, the structure experiences your growth as its emergency. They are not wrong that it is an emergency. They are only wrong about whose. By the end of this, you will understand what happens inside a person like you when the absorption stops, why the people around you panic in the weeks and months that follow, and the one insight that separates the empath who rebuilds into someone the world cannot exploit again, from the empath who quietly slides back into the old arrangement when the pressure becomes too much. That distinction will decide the rest of your life, and I am going to make sure you do not miss it. If these ideas resonate with you, hit that subscribe button for more top-tier content. Also, drop a "finally silent" in the comments so I know you're ready. Let's dive in. Understand exactly what you have been doing for the last 20, 30, 40 years. Because until you can see the mechanism precisely, you will not be able to stop apologizing for the moment it ended. You were absorbing. That is the specific, technical word for it. Every room you entered, you did not just experience the room. You took the room in. You felt the tension between two people in the corner. You felt the unspoken resentment beneath a colleague's polite smile. You felt the sadness a parent was carrying that they had not admitted to themselves. You felt the fear underneath someone else's aggression. And you did not just feel these things. You quietly, efficiently, invisibly absorbed them. You took the raw, emotional material of the room into your own nervous system and metabolized it so that the room could keep functioning as if the material were not there. The room did not know you were doing this. You did not fully know you were doing this. But your body knew. Your body has been keeping the receipts for the entire arrangement, Consider the exact texture of your ordinary Tuesday. You wake up, and before you have finished your coffee, you have already scanned the emotional weather of whoever else is in the house. You have adjusted your voice, your face, your energy to whatever you have detected. You go to work, and before your first meeting is over, you have already absorbed 3 people's frustrations, 2 people's insecurities, and 1 person's low-grade rage that they have not admitted they are carrying. You take a lunch break and you check on a friend, and you carry away her sadness in a small pocket of your chest for the rest of the afternoon. You go home and you absorb the day your partner had, whether or not they described it accurately. And then, in the last hour before sleep, you finally briefly notice your own state, and you find it exhausted without being able to point to a single specific reason for the exhaustion. Because the reason is not any one interaction. The reason is that you have been running an emotional absorption engine at full capacity, for free, in every room you have entered, for as long as you can remember. The people around you have never had to run this engine. It is not that they are lesser. It is that they are configured differently. Their nervous systems do not automatically take in the atmospheric weight of the room the way yours does, so they experience the day as a series of discrete interactions. You experience the day as a single, continuous ingestion of everyone else's material. By evening, they are tired from what they did. You are exhausted from what you absorbed. These are different fatigues, and the culture only recognizes the first as legitimate. Yours is the second, and the second is almost invisible, which is why you have spent years being told you are overreacting, or being sensitive, or needing to toughen up. You do not need to toughen up. You need the world to finally acknowledge that you have been running an engine no one else was running, and no one ever bothered to fuel it for you. The moment the engine finally shuts off is the moment we are here to describe. There is a specific point at which the absorption stops. It does not usually arrive on the day you would expect. It does not arrive after the biggest betrayal. It does not arrive after the loudest argument. It arrives most often on a completely ordinary afternoon in response to something small. A comment from a family member you have already forgiven 100 times. A request from a friend that individually is not unreasonable. A tone from a partner that, in isolation, is not that different from any other tone. And yet, on this particular ordinary afternoon, something in you receives the small thing and does not process it the way it has always processed. Something in you registers, without any conscious decision on your part, that the account is empty, that the emotional reserve you have been drawing from to keep absorbing has run dry, that the well has hit stone. And in that moment, you feel a specific sensation. It is not rage. Rage would be easier for the people around you to handle. Rage they could argue with. What you feel is quieter and more terminal. You feel a sudden, complete structural indifference to the outcome you have been managing for years. You realize, in a flash that will change the rest of your life, whether or not you fully register it in the moment, that you no longer care whether the person in front of you is comfortable. You no longer care whether the room functions. You no longer care whether you are perceived as the good one, the patient one, the understanding one. Something in you has crossed a line that you did not know existed until you crossed it. And on the other side of the line, the machinery that has been running you does not run anymore. Jung watched this transition in his patients and wrote about it with great care. He understood that most people would misread it as depression because it looks superficially like a loss of feeling. But he was insistent that it was not a loss. It was a reorganization. What was happening was that the specific type of feeling you had been producing on demand, the metabolic empathy for everyone else's material, was being withdrawn. And the withdrawal is not the end of feeling. It is the end of feeling as a service you were providing without consent. Feeling itself does not die. It gets returned to you from the various rooms it had been distributed across, and it collects now inside the person who had been generating it all along. That is the first phase of the integration. Everything you had been giving away is coming home. This is why the days and weeks that follow the threshold have such a strange interior quality. You feel less, and you feel more. You feel less on behalf of others because you are no longer running their absorption engine. And you feel more on behalf of yourself because for the first time in your adult life, the entire capacity of your nervous system is available for the interior of the one who owns it. You will experience this at first as a kind of coldness, and you will worry that you are becoming someone you did not want to become. You are not. What you are experiencing is the specific, unfamiliar sensation of possessing your own emotional life for the first time. It is unfamiliar because you have never had it. It is not coldness. It is the temperature of a self that is no longer being drained. Now watch what happens in the environment around you, because this is where the pattern becomes unmistakable, and where you will need to hold steady against a very specific pressure. The people who have been benefiting from your absorption, and I want to be careful here, most of them not maliciously, most of them without ever having named the arrangement even to themselves, will begin to sense that something in the arrangement has broken. They will not know what has broken. They will only know that the room feels different. Their moods no longer land in you the way they used to. Their complaints no longer produce the reflexive management they used to produce. Their small demands no longer summon your immediate accommodation, and the loss of your absorption will register in them unconsciously as a kind of threat. They will not describe it that way. They will describe it as concern. They will describe it as noticing that you seem different lately. They will describe it as worry about your well-being. And some of that concern will be genuine, but a specific portion of it, and you must learn to distinguish this portion, will be the panic of a system whose load-bearing element has stopped bearing the load. The tactics that used to work on you will begin to be redeployed with escalating intensity. The guilt trip that used to summon your compliance will be tried again, harder. The passive silence that used to summon your reassurance will be tried again, longer. The story of their own suffering that used to summon your absorption will be told again, with more detail. The accusation that you have changed, that you are cold, that you are not yourself, will be introduced with increasing frequency. Notice something crucial about this sequence. It is not personalized. It is not calibrated to your specific interior. It is a set of protocols that has worked on you before, being tried in order, because the system does not have another set of protocols. If these do not work, most systems have no backup. They were built around the assumption that these would always work. And when they stop working, the system either learns something new about you, which is rare, or the system panics, which is common. This is where your empathy will be turned against your integration. Because the people who love you, even the ones who benefited from you, will look uncomfortable in ways that make you want to soften. You will want to offer a small reassurance, a small explanation, a small return to the old absorption, just to make the room easier. Do not, and I want you to understand exactly why, because a single return, even a small one, will teach the system that the old protocols do work. They just need to be applied a little harder next time. You will not have preserved the peace. You will have taught your environment that your integration is negotiable, and your integration cannot be negotiable, not because you have become hard, because the version of you that was constantly negotiable was the version that almost did not survive. Jung wrote about this with a specific kind of clinical precision. He noted that individuation, the process of becoming a real person distinct from the roles the environment had assigned, is almost always resisted by the environment that assigned the roles. Not because the environment is cruel, because the environment is habitual, and habits in family systems, in friend groups, in workplaces, in couples, have their own gravitational pull. The gravitational pull is what you are feeling against you right now. It is not evidence that you are wrong to change. It is evidence that you are changing, and the field is doing what fields do when a large object inside them shifts. It is generating resistance proportional to the size of the shift. Do not misread the resistance as a verdict. Read it as data. The size of the resistance is one accurate measure of how important the shift actually is. Now here is where the frame flips, and I want you to hold something before the flip lands, because up to this point, you may have heard versions of what I am saying in other places. Empaths finally leaving toxic environments, highly sensitive people learning to set boundaries, kind people finally standing up for themselves. These framings are true as far as they go, and they are also insufficient in a specific and important way because they treat what is happening as primarily about them, about the ones you are pulling away from. It is not primarily about them. That is the reversal. The old absorption arrangement was almost never sustained primarily by their exploitation. It was sustained primarily by your specific belief about what your value depended on. Sit with that carefully, because this is the sentence that will still be echoing in you 2 weeks from now. The people around you took what you offered because you offered it, but they were not the reason you offered it. You offered it because, at some very early age, you concluded that you would only be safe, only be loved, only be permitted to remain in your primary attachments if you were maximally useful to the interior states of others. That conclusion was not their fault. It was the specific psychological configuration that got installed in you before you had the capacity to consent to its installation. And once installed, it ran your life without your knowing it was running your life. Every act of absorption was, from the inside, a small expression of the belief that your continued belonging depended on the absorption. You called it kindness. It was in part kindness. But underneath the kindness was an older bargain, and the bargain was, I will manage the interior of everyone in this room so that no one asks me to leave. The moment you snap, what actually cracks is not your relationship with those people. What cracks is the belief. The belief that your right to remain in your own life depends on your usefulness to everyone else's interior states. Once that belief cracks, the specific behaviors of absorption cannot sustain themselves because their entire fuel supply has been the belief. This is why the snap from the inside feels less like an act of will and more like a piece of internal architecture giving way. You did not decide to stop. Something older and more structural than your daily consciousness decided to stop. Your job now is not to reproduce the decision. Your job is to keep the space open that the collapse of the old belief has created, so that a new arrangement, one you actually own, can be built inside the space. This is the difference between the empath who snaps and rebuilds and the empath who snaps and slides back. The one who slides back has not yet cracked the belief. She has only interrupted the behavior, and when the interruption produces enough external pressure, the belief is still intact and the behavior returns. The one who rebuilds has cracked the belief, and she does not return to the old behavior even under pressure because the fuel supply for the old behavior is no longer running. This is why some people snap once and never go back, and others snap over and always return. Behavior without belief change is a pause. Belief change without needing to announce it is the actual transformation. Now here is something almost no one names, and I am going to name it because you need to see it before you land in it. There is a specific second absorption that appears in the weeks and months after the first collapse, and it will look like health, and it will not be health. It will look like a new kind of caring, but it will be the old engine trying to run in a new form. Here is what it looks like from the inside. You have stopped absorbing the specific people who used you, but you find yourself, without noticing, absorbing new ones. Perhaps you meet a new friend whose story of suffering activates the old machinery. Perhaps a person at work confides in you, and the confidence summons the same reflexive management you used to give away for free. Perhaps you find yourself reading online, or in books, or in videos about other people's suffering, and you experience the reading as if you were personally responsible for absorbing what you're reading. The engine has not turned off. It has simply lost its former targets and is searching for new ones. This is the specific failure mode that keeps people in your position stuck at stage 2 of the transformation for years, and sometimes forever. They interrupted the old arrangement, they cracked the belief part way, but they never dismantled the engine itself. And so the engine finds new material to metabolize, and the metabolizing continues, and the person continues to describe herself as an empath who has finally set boundaries, and continues in fact to be an unfueled machine, burning her own reserves for a purpose that was never assigned to her. The mature move is different, and Jung understood this precisely. The engine itself must be brought under conscious command, not turned off, redirected. Your capacity to perceive the interior states of other people is not a curse to be silenced. It is one of the most sophisticated instruments a human being can possess. But it must be operated deliberately, from a position of choice, not automatically, from a position of unconscious compulsion. You get to decide now when the instrument is deployed. You get to decide who is worth its use. You get to decide when to look away from a suffering that is not yours to carry, without any moral collapse, because you are no longer under the childhood contract that made you responsible for every interior in your radius. You are the operator of the instrument. You are not the instrument. That distinction is the entire second half of the work, and it is the distinction almost no one names, which is why almost no one arrives at it. Now the operational layer, because insight without operation is another sophisticated form of the old absorption, only now you are absorbing content instead of people. And I have no interest in participating in that. The first operation is the deliberate reduction of your absorption surface. Not permanently, but during the specific phase you are in. You have spent years running the engine at full capacity, and the engine cannot recalibrate while it is still processing at full capacity. You need to reduce the number of rooms you enter, the number of stories you take in, the number of people whose interior weather you are asked to metabolize. This is not selfishness. This is the emotional equivalent of a burn patient reducing exposure while the skin regenerates. You will regenerate the capacity to be selective about your empathy only if you first give the underlying system a period of dramatically reduced load. Weeks, sometimes months. You will feel guilty about this. Let the guilt arise, do not obey it. Do not. It is the residue of the old belief, and it will fade as the new arrangement takes hold. The second operation is the ruthless separation in your daily life between people who can hold you and people who need you to hold them. You have been in relationships where the second is confused with the first. The person who needs you to hold them has, over years, presented themselves as someone who is holding you, when the actual traffic of the relationship has flowed almost entirely one way. You know exactly who these people are. Your body has always known. You have overridden the knowledge because the alternative, the acknowledgement, has felt too costly. It is no longer more costly than the arrangement. Begin, in small ways, to shift the composition of your attention. Fewer hours to the ones who need, more hours to the ones who can hold, and if the ones who can hold are few, then more hours to yourself, which is not a substitute for connection, but a temporary occupancy of the space where connection will eventually arrive. The third operation is the deliberate cultivation of your capacity to feel for yourself at the resolution you used to feel for others. This is harder than it sounds. because your instrument has been calibrated outward for so long that turning it inward feels foreign. You will sit down to notice your own interior and find that the instrument reflexively looks for someone else's interior to read. It will take practice to hold the instrument steady on yourself. But over time, this practice does something extraordinary. It gives you access to your own life at the same resolution at which you have been reading everyone else's for years. You will discover, quietly, that you have been a stranger to yourself in the exact places you have been, an intimate of everyone else. The reunion with yourself will not be dramatic. It will be slow and specific, and in a way you may not have language for yet, structurally satisfying. You are finally paying yourself the attention you were paying every room you entered. Now imagine 1 year forward. You wake in the same body, but a specific structural fact about the way you move through the world has changed. You enter rooms without automatically taking on their weather. You listen to people without automatically metabolizing their content. You care, but the caring is now a choice, and the choice is deployed selectively and consciously. Some of the relationships in your life have shifted. A few have quietly ended. A few have quietly deepened. A few new ones have arrived, drawn by a specific quality in you that was not there before, a quality of a person who is present without being available for extraction. Your presence in a room now carries a weight that used to be absent. People notice it. They cannot name it. Some of them are drawn to it. Some of them are unsettled by it. Both reactions are correct, and neither one moves you the way it would have moved you a year ago. Because the being who is now doing the entering and the noticing is a being who has been fully repossessed by its rightful owner, you. Before we close, there is a deeper layer, and you have earned it because you are still here, and because the person still here at this point in a video like this is not casually curious. You have lived this, you are living it, and you deserve the last, quieter piece. Here is what almost no one tells you about what happens after an empath truly snaps and stays snapped. The kindness does not die. That is the fear, and it is a wrong fear. The kindness reorganizes. It stops being an automatic emission and becomes a deliberate offering. And here is the strange thing you will notice, 6 months or a year in. Your kindness, when you finally give it, will begin to have a specific weight it never had before, because it is no longer being distributed automatically to every room. When you extend it, the person on the receiving end will feel that it is a choice, and choices, unlike automatic emissions, register in the receiver as something real. You will find that the fewer people you offer your interior to, the more powerfully your interior lands when you do offer it. This is not scarcity strategy. This is elementary physics. The value of something concentrated is different from the value of something diffused. And here is the deeper truth Jung was pointing at in his slow, careful way. The person you are becoming is not the opposite of the empath you were. She is the empath you always were, running on her own terms for the first time in her life. The empathy did not disappear. The compulsion around the empathy disappeared. And what remains is an empathy that is somehow both quieter and heavier, both rarer and more real. People who encounter you now often describe your presence as calm, but calm is not the right word. The word is settled. You have settled inside yourself, and settled is a state that most of the people you meet have never actually achieved in any sustained way, and they can feel it in you even when they cannot name it. This is the specific gravity that the mature empath carries, and it is one of the least documented and most valuable states a human being can occupy. You are walking toward it. You may already be closer than you know. The silence that arrived on the ordinary afternoon was not the end of your softness. It was the beginning of a softness that finally has a spine. And that softness, once it stabilizes, is not something the old arrangement can metabolize. It bounces off the old tactics. It does not respond to the old summons. It does not fit inside the old container. It is a specific thing in the world that the old world does not know how to touch. That is what you are becoming. That is what the snap was for. If this landed the way I think it did, subscribe. Not because I asked, because you understand now that the work of moving from the collapse into the integration, and from the integration into the settled empathy that becomes a form of quiet sovereignty, is not the work of one video. It is a multi-year construction, and it needs a room where it is taken seriously. This is that room. What you have heard is one layer. There is deeper work on shadow integration, deeper work on the specific mechanics of building a self that no absorption can dismantle, deeper work on operating the instrument you have been carrying without knowing it was an instrument. Stay in the room, and whatever you do, don't stop now. The on-screen video matters more than you think. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. I'll see you there. See what others miss. Know what others fear. Become who others can't.